The cafeteria fell silent as Carson Mitchell grabbed the poor girl's wrist and yanked her to the center of the room. Every student stopped eating. Every conversation died. Autumn Davis stood there in her thrift store jeans and faded sweater, surrounded by 300 staring faces. Carson's voice boomed across the cafeteria like thunder. Since you can't afford real food, maybe you should eat like the animal you are. Bark for your lunch. Scholarship girl. The smell of cheap pizza and fear filled the air. Autumn's heart pounded against her ribs, but she didn't cry. She didn't beg. Instead, something flickered behind her green eyes. Something dangerous. Something none of them saw coming. Before we continue with Autumn's incredible story, I want to take just a moment to connect with you. Stories like this one about courage, resilience, and standing up for what's right, they matter. They remind us that real strength comes from character, not circumstances. If this story is touching your heart the way it's touching mine, would you mind hitting that like button? And if you've got thoughts about Autumn's journey or your own experiences with standing up to bullies, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Carson Mitchell ruled Westfield Academy, 6 feet tall, quarterback build, daddy's credit card in his back pocket. His father owned half the town. His girlfriend Sierra was head cheerleader. His best friend Blake drove a brand new BMW. They were untouchable. At least, they thought they were. Autumn Davis was different. She lived in the trailer park on Maple Street. Her mom worked double shifts at the diner. Her clothes came from Goodwill. Her lunch was a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in a brown paper bag. She sat alone at table 12. The one by the garbage cans. The one nobody wanted. But today was different. Today, Carson decided she needed to be taught a lesson. I said bark? Carson repeated, tightening his grip on her wrist. His voice carried across the cafeteria like a whip crack. You want that free lunch? You want to keep taking our tax dollars? Then bark like the dog you are. Sierra laughed from behind him, a high-pitched giggle that cut through the silence. Oh my God, Carson, you're so bad. Her pink lip gloss caught the fluorescent lights. Her designer bag cost more than Autumn's mom made in a month. Blake pulled out his phone. This is going straight to social media. Everyone's gonna see this. His thumb hovered over the record button like a weapon. Miss Harrison, the lunch monitor, stood 20 feet away. She saw everything. She heard everything. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Carson's father donated $50,000 to the school every year. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Autumn looked around the cafeteria. 300 faces stared back at her. Some looked excited. Some looked scared. Most looked away. This was entertainment. This was power. This was how the world worked at Westfield Academy. Come on, Carson said, his voice dripping with fake sweetness. Just a little bark. Woof woof. Then you can have your poverty sandwich. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of bleach mixed with cafeteria. Food hung in the air like a fog. Autumn's worn sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor. Her free hand clenched into a fist. I'm waiting, Carson said. His grip tightened. We're all waiting. Autumn took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was calm, steady, like glass that hadn't broken yet. Let go of my wrist. Carson laughed. Excuse me? I said, let go of my wrist. Each word was precise, measured, like she was weighing them before she spoke. Or what? Carson's eyes narrowed. You'll call your mommy? Oh, wait. She's too busy serving coffee to losers to care about her loser daughter. The cafeteria erupted in gasps. Someone whispered, he did not just go there. Another voice said, this is getting intense. Sierra clapped her hands together. Ooh, burn. Carson, you're on fire today. Blake held his phone higher. This is gold, pure gold. But Autumn didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even blink. Instead, she did something that made Carson's confident smile falter just a little. She smiled back. You know what, Carson? She said. You're absolutely right. The cafeteria went dead silent. Not the kind of silence where people whisper, the kind where everyone stops breathing. I am poor. Autumn continued. My mom does work 2 jobs. I do get free lunch. And yes, my clothes come from the thrift store on 5th Street. She paused, looking around the room. But here's what's interesting about your argument. Carson's eyes flickered with confusion. My what? Your argument? See? You're operating under several false premises. Would you like me to explain them to you? Blake lowered his phone slightly. What is she doing? Sierra's perfectly glossed lips formed a small O of confusion. Is she? Debating him? Carson tightened his grip again. But something had changed. The power dynamic had shifted, and he could feel it slipping away like sand through his fingers. Shut up. I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. Oh? But this isn't an excuse. Autumn said. Her voice grew stronger, more confident, like she was stepping into a role she'd been born to play. This is a logical deconstruction of your position. You see, you've made 3 critical errors in your reasoning. The cafeteria leaned forward. Every student, every teacher, every staff member was hanging on her words now. The girl they'd ignored for 3 years was suddenly the most interesting person in the room. Error number 1. Autumn continued. Is your assumption that economic status determines human worth? This is what philosophers call the fallacy of false correlation. Would you like me to provide historical examples of why this thinking is flawed? Carson's face flushed red. I said shut up. Error number 2 is your belief that public assistance programs like free lunch are charity rather than investments in human capital. The economic data actually shows that. I said shut up. Carson yanked her wrist harder, but Autumn didn't even wince. And error number 3, she said, her voice rising just enough to carry across the entire cafeteria, is your fundamental misunderstanding of power dynamics in social hierarchies. Blake's phone was forgotten in his hand. Sierra had stopped smiling entirely. Miss Harrison took a step closer, her eyes wide, with something that looked like recognition. You see, Carson, Autumn continued. You think power comes from money? From status? From making others feel small? But real power? Real power comes from understanding how the world actually works. And right now, in front of 300 witnesses, you're about to learn exactly how much you don't understand. Carson's hand began to shake, just slightly, but enough for Autumn to notice. You think you're so smart? You think your fancy words scare me? I don't think anything, Autumn replied. I know. For instance, I know that Westfield Academy's Code of Conduct specifically prohibits physical intimidation of students. Section 4. Subsection B. I know that your father's business, Mitchell Construction, is currently under federal investigation for tax evasion. I know that Sierra's been cheating on you with Blake for the past 2 months, and I know something else. The cafeteria was so quiet you could hear hearts beating. What? Carson whispered. Autumn leaned closer, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. But somehow everyone could still hear her. I know that you're not nearly as untouchable as you think you are. Sierra gasped. How did she? Blake. She knows about us. How does she know? Blake's face went white. I don't know. I don't know how she knows anything. Carson's grip loosened for just a moment. In that moment, Autumn pulled her wrist free and took a step back. She straightened her thrift store sweater and looked around the cafeteria with the confidence of someone who had just reminded herself exactly who she was. You want to know something funny? She said. For 3 years, you've all looked at me and seen exactly what you expected to see. Poor girl, quiet girl, invisible girl. And I let you. Do you know why? Nobody answered. Nobody even breathed. Because sometimes the best strategy is to let your opponents underestimate you. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is observe, listen, learn, study your environment, and wait for the perfect moment to reveal your true position. Miss Harrison's eyes widened. She took another step forward. And for the first time, she really looked at Autumn Davis, really saw her. And what position is that? Carson's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Autumn smiled, not the scared smile of a cornered animal, not the desperate smile of someone trying to please. The confident smile of someone who had been playing a game nobody else even knew existed. "Well," she said, "I suppose you'll find out soon enough. But let me ask you something first. Carson, have you ever heard of the National High School Debate Championship?" The cafeteria erupted. Students started talking all at once. Phones appeared from pockets and purses. Someone shouted, "Oh snap, she's about to end him." Carson's face went pale. "What about it?" "Just curious if you followed the results from last year's competition. It was quite interesting. A sophomore from a small town in the Midwest took first place, beat students from the most expensive prep schools in the country, made national news." Sierra grabbed Carson's arm. "Carson, what is she talking about?" "The funny thing is," Autumn continued, "nobody expected her to win. She was just some poor girl from nowhere. Wore thrift store clothes to the competition. Carried her research in a beaten-up backpack. But she had something those other kids didn't have." Blake finally found his voice. "What?" "She was hungry." Autumn's eyes swept across the cafeteria, meeting every gaze that dared to look at her. "Really? Truly hungry. Not for food. For justice. For truth. For the chance to prove that intelligence doesn't come with a price tag." Carson took a step backward. For the first time in his life, he looked small. "You're lying." "Am I?" Autumn reached into her backpack and pulled out something that made the entire cafeteria gasp. A small golden trophy. Engraved on the side were the words, "National High School Debate Champion." The silence that followed was deafening. "Miss..." Harrison stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Autumn Davis. Oh my God. You're Autumn Davis. The Autumn Davis." "Wait," Sierra said, her voice high and panicked. "You mean she's famous?" "Not famous." "Miss," Harrison said, staring at Autumn with something like awe. "Legendary. She's been featured in Education Weekly, the New York Times. She's the youngest student ever to win the national championship." Blake's phone clattered to the floor. "But she's just poor," Autumn finished. "Yes, I am. And that's exactly why I won." Carson's face cycled through confusion, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to fear. "This doesn't change anything. You're still nothing. Your mom still serves coffee. You still live in a trailer." "You're absolutely right," Autumn said. "None of that has changed. But here's what has changed." She looked directly into Carson's eyes. 300 people just watched you try to humiliate someone who's achieved more in 17 years than you'll achieve in your entire life. The cafeteria erupted again. This time, the voices weren't whispers. Students were cheering. Someone started a slow clap that built into thunderous applause. "This is impossible," Carson said. "You're nobody. You're nothing." "And yet," Autumn said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade, "I'm the one with the trophy." Carson lunged forward, his face twisted with rage. "I don't care about your stupid trophy. I don't care what anyone thinks. You're still going to bark like a dog." But before he could reach her, something happened that nobody expected. "Miss," Harrison stepped between them, her hand raised. "That's enough." "Mr. Mitchell," Carson stopped short. "Miss Harrison. She's Autumn Davis." "Miss," Harrison said firmly, "and you just tried to physically intimidate a national champion in front of 300 witnesses?" "So what?" Carson snarled. "My dad owns this school." "Actually," came a new voice from the cafeteria entrance. "He doesn't?" Everyone turned. Principal Edwards stood in the doorway. And he wasn't alone. Behind him were two people Carson had never wanted to see in the same room together. His father, Robert Mitchell, and a woman in a dark suit carrying a briefcase. "Dad?" Carson's voice was small, confused. Robert Mitchell's face was pale. He looked at his son with something that might have been disappointment. Or shame. "Carson, we need to talk." The woman in the suit stepped forward. "Mr. Mitchell, my name is Agent Sarah Chen with the Internal Revenue Service. We need to discuss some irregularities in your business finances." The cafeteria went dead silent again. This time, it was the silence of watching someone's world collapse in real time. Carson looked from his father to the IRS agent to Autumn, who stood calmly in the center of it all like the eye of a hurricane. "How?" he whispered. "How did you know?" Autumn tilted her head slightly. "About the investigation? Well, that's the thing about being really good at research. Carson, you learn how to find information that other people miss, but the investigation is confidential," Agent Chen said, looking at Autumn with professional interest. "How could a high school student possibly?" "Public records," Autumn replied. "Financial disclosure forms, incorporation document, building permits that don't match reported income. It's all public information if you know where to look. And more importantly, if you know how to connect the dots." Principal Edwards stepped forward. "Miss Davis, are you saying you uncovered evidence of tax evasion?" "I'm saying I noticed some inconsistencies that seemed worth reporting to the appropriate authorities." Autumn's voice was perfectly calm, perfectly professional. "About 6 months ago." Carson's world tilted. "6 months ago? You planned this?" "I didn't plan anything," Autumn said. "I just did what any citizen should do when they notice potential illegal activity. I reported it." Robert Mitchell's face went from pale to gray. "You mean a 17-year-old girl brought down my entire operation?" "Actually," Agent Chen said, checking her notes, "the investigation was triggered by an anonymous tip we received containing detailed financial analysis and supporting documentation. The most thorough report we'd ever seen from a civilian." All eyes turned to Autumn. She shrugged. "I take advanced placement economics. Professor Williams encourages us to practice our analytical skills on real-world data." Sierra grabbed Blake's arm. "I don't understand what's happening." "What's happening, Miss?" Harrison said, her voice filled with something that sounded like pride. "Is that we just witnessed the most epic takedown in Westfield Academy history." Carson stood in the center of the cafeteria, surrounded by 300 students who were no longer afraid of him. His girlfriend had been exposed as a cheater. His best friend had betrayed him. His father was being led away by federal agents. And the girl he'd tried to humiliate had just revealed herself to be a nationally recognized genius who had apparently been playing chess while he was playing checkers. "This isn't over," Carson said, his voice shaking with rage and desperation. Autumn looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Yes, Carson, it is." "No," Carson shouted. "I don't care about any of this. I don't care about your stupid trophy or your stupid investigation or any of it. You're still just trailer trash, and everyone knows it." The cafeteria held its breath. This was the moment, the point of no return. Autumn stepped forward until she was close enough to Carson that only he could hear her next words. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Carson?" she whispered. "What?" "You've been rich your whole life, and you're still an idiot. I've been poor my whole life, and I'm still smarter than you'll ever be. Which one of us do you think is going to have a better future?" Carson's face contorted with fury. "I'll destroy you. I'll make your life hell. You'll what?" Autumn's voice was still calm, still controlled. "Sue me? With what lawyer? Your father's assets are about to be frozen. Threaten me? In front of 300 witnesses and multiple authority figures? Please. Carson, think before you speak. It's embarrassing for both of us when you don't." The crowd was no longer silent. Students were laughing, cheering. Someone started chanting, "Autumn! Autumn! Autumn!" And soon the entire cafeteria had joined in. Carson looked around at faces that had once feared him, that had once hung on his every word, that had once treated him like royalty. Now they were all looking at him like he was exactly what he'd always been, a bully who had just been exposed as weak. But Carson Mitchell had one last card to play, one last desperate move. And as Autumn turned to walk away, basking in her victory, he pulled out his phone and made a call that would change everything. "Blake," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "remember what we talked about? About Autumn's little secret? The one we found out about last week?" Autumn froze. For the first time all day, her confident expression faltered. Blake's face went white. "Carson, no, don't." "What secret?" Sierra demanded. Carson's smile returned, cruel and vicious. Tell them, Blake, tell them about Autumn's mom. The cafeteria went quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. Dangerous. Autumn turned around slowly. The color had drained from her face. Carson? Don't what? Carson's voice was gleeful, triumphant. Don't tell everyone the truth about your perfect little family? What truth? Someone called out. Carson looked directly at Autumn. His eyes filled with malicious joy. Blake? Tell them where Autumn's mom really works. Blake shook his head. Carson, this is too far. Tell them! Carson shouted. The cafeteria waited. 300 people held their breath. And that's when the second shoe dropped. She doesn't work at a diner, Blake said quietly. Autumn's mom works at Westfield County Correctional Facility. She's a prison guard. Gasps echoed across the cafeteria. But Carson wasn't done. And do you want to know why she works there? Carson's smile was vicious. Because Autumn's dad is serving 15 to 25 for armed robbery? Her mom took the job to be close to him. The scholarship girl's father is a convicted felon. The silence that followed was deafening. Autumn stood in the center of the cafeteria, surrounded by 300 staring faces. And for the first time in 3 years, she looked exactly like what she was, a 17-year-old girl whose world had just collapsed around her. But as Carson savored his moment of victory, as he prepared to deliver the killing blow that would destroy Autumn Davis once and for all, neither he nor anyone else in that cafeteria had any idea what was about to walk through those doors. Because Autumn Davis had one more secret, one more card to play, and when the cafeteria doors swung open and revealed what was waiting on the other side, Carson Mitchell would realize that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The doors opened, and everything changed. The cafeteria doors swung open with a bang that echoed like thunder. Every head turned, every breath stopped, and there, standing in the doorway like something out of a movie, was a man in a crisp military uniform, decorated with ribbons and medals that caught the fluorescent lights like stars. Behind him walked 3 more people, a woman in an expensive business suit carrying a leather briefcase, a younger man with a press badge hanging around his neck, and someone that made Carson Mitchell's blood run cold, Detective Ray Morrison, Westfield County's lead investigator. But it was the man in uniform who commanded every eye in the room, 6 feet tall, steel gray hair, the kind of presence that made people stand straighter without being asked, the kind of man who had seen things and done things that most people only read about in books. Carson's triumphant smile began to falter. This wasn't part of his plan. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Excuse me, the officer said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I'm looking for Autumn Davis. The silence in the cafeteria was absolute. 300 students sat frozen, their eyes darting between the military officer and the girl who stood in the center of the room like she was facing a firing squad. Carson found his voice first, though it came out shakier than he intended. Who are you? This is a private school matter? The officer ignored him completely. His eyes found Autumn, and when they did, something extraordinary happened. His stern expression softened into something that looked like fierce pride, mixed with barely contained fury. There's my girl, he said, his voice carrying across the silent cafeteria like a warm embrace. Autumn's face went white, then red. Then something between confusion, hope, and terror flickered in her green eyes. Colonel Martinez. Hello, kiddo. Colonel Martinez stepped into the cafeteria, his boots clicking against the linoleum with military precision. Each step seemed to echo with 20 years of service and a lifetime of protecting what mattered. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder getting here from the Pentagon. The word Pentagon hit the cafeteria like a bomb. Students started whispering frantically. Someone said, "Did he just say Pentagon?" Another voice whispered, "What is happening right now?" A third student pulled out their phone and started recording. Carson looked from Autumn to the colonel and back again, his confidence cracking like ice in spring. "I don't understand. Who is this guy?" The woman in the business suit stepped forward, her heels clicking with authority. My name is Rebecca Chen, and I'm a senior producer with CNN Education. We're here to interview Autumn about her upcoming appearance on Young Minds That Matter, our flagship program about exceptional young Americans. The young man with the press badge raised his hand. Danny Rodriguez, Education Weekly. Miss Davis, we've been trying to reach you for weeks about the cover story we're running in our national issue, From Poverty to Pentagon, the Autumn Davis story. Detective Morrison remained by the door, his eyes scanning the room with professional interest. When his gaze landed on Carson, the boy felt like a bug under a microscope. "And I'm here," Morrison said slowly, "to investigate some very serious allegations about harassment and cyberbullying involving a military family." "Miss," Harrison stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Autumn, what's going on? How do all these people know you?" Autumn looked around the cafeteria at 300 faces staring at her, with expressions ranging from shock to awe to complete bewilderment. Carson's cruel revelation about her father hung in the air like smoke from a fire. For the first time in 3 years, she was the center of attention, but not in any way she'd ever imagined. She started, then stopped, took a breath, straightened her shoulders in a way that suddenly reminded everyone in the room that she was a national debate champion. "I guess my secret's out." Colonel Martinez chuckled, a warm sound that somehow made the whole cafeteria feel safer. "Which secret would that be?" "Kiddo, you've got quite a few these days." Carson felt control slipping away from him like sand through his fingers. His moment of triumph was turning into something else entirely. "What secrets?" "She just told us her dad's in prison for armed robbery. Her whole family are criminals." The silence that followed was so complete, you could hear dust settling on tables. Colonel Martinez turned to look at Carson for the first time, and when he did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. His eyes, which had been warm when looking at Autumn, went cold as Arctic steel. "Son, I think there's been some serious confusion here." "No confusion," Carson said, his voice rising with desperation. "We know all about her criminal father. Blake found out the truth." "Tell them." "Blake." Blake stepped forward reluctantly, sweat beading on his forehead. We know he's serving 15 to 25 for armed robbery. We know her mom works at the prison to be close to him. That's why they live in that trailer park." Detective Morrison laughed. Actually laughed out loud, the sound bitter and sharp. "Oh, this is rich. Martinez, you've got to hear this kid's version of events." Colonel Martinez nodded slowly, his jaw tightening with each word. "I'm listening. Please, continue with your theory." Carson sensed an opportunity to regain control of the narrative. The adults seemed confused, which meant he still had a chance to expose Autumn for what she really was. "So you see, she might be some big-shot debate champion, but her family's still a bunch of criminals. That's who she really is underneath all the fancy words." Trailer trash, with a convicted felon for a father, Sierra, who had been silent through most of the confrontation, suddenly spoke up. "Wait, Carson, how did you even find this out? You never told me you were investigating her family." Blake's face went even paler. "Yeah, dude, you never said where you got that information." "It doesn't matter where I got it," Carson snapped. "What matters is that it's true, right?" He looked around desperately for support. "Right?" "Interesting theory," Colonel Martinez said, his voice carrying the kind of dangerous calm that comes before a storm. "There's just one small problem with it." "What's that?" Carson's voice cracked slightly. Colonel Martinez reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small leather folder. He flipped it open and held it up for the entire cafeteria to see. Inside was a photograph of a man in military fatigues standing next to an American flag, and beneath it, an identification card with official seals and stamps. Autumn's father is Staff Sergeant David Davis, United States Army Special Forces. He's not serving 15 to 25 for armed robbery. The cafeteria erupted like a volcano. Students jumped out of their seats. Phones appeared from everywhere. Someone screamed, "What is happening right now?" another student shouted. "Special forces? Like actual special forces? He's serving his country." Colonel Martinez continued, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "On a classified mission in Eastern Europe that I can't discuss in detail. But what I can tell you is that Staff Sergeant Davis is one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to command. He's saved more lives than you'll probably meet in your entire lifetime." Carson's mouth opened and closed, like a fish drowning in air. But Blake said, "Someone told me." "Someone told you what?" "Exactly?" Detective Morrison stepped forward, his notebook appearing in his hand like magic, because making false statements about a military family, especially one involved in classified operations, is a federal offense. All eyes turned to Blake, whose face had gone pale as paper. Sweat was now visibly dripping down his forehead. Carson told me. He said he found out somehow. He had all these details." "What details?" Detective Morrison's voice carried the weight of 20 years in law enforcement. "Be specific." Blake looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would rescue him. He said Autumn's dad was arrested 3 years ago. Said he had court records. Said her mom took the prison job to stay close to him. "Court records?" Detective Morrison's eyebrows rose. "That's very specific. Carson, where exactly did you obtain court records about a military family?" Carson's confidence was now completely gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. Someone told me." "Who?" "I don't remember." "You don't remember who gave you classified information about a military family?" Detective Morrison pulled out a small recording device. "That's interesting, because obtaining and distributing false information about service members and their families is covered under the Military Family Protection Act. We're talking federal charges here." "Son." The woman from CNN stepped forward, her eyes bright with journalistic interest. "Excuse me, Detective, but are you saying this young man deliberately fabricated and spread false information about a soldier's family?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Detective Morrison replied. "And depending on how this information was obtained and distributed, we might be looking at charges including harassment, defamation, cyberbullying, and potentially even violations of federal laws protecting military families." Principal Edwards, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "Detective Morrison, are you saying that Carson has been engaged in a systematic campaign against Miss Davis?" "That's what we're here to investigate." Morrison flipped to a new page in his notebook. "We've received multiple reports about fake social media posts, doctored videos, and coordinated harassment campaigns, all targeting the daughter of a deployed service member." Carson looked around the cafeteria desperately. The faces that had once feared him now looked at him with disgust and disbelief. Even Sierra had moved several steps away from him, shaking her head. "This is insane," Carson said, his voice climbing toward hysteria. "You're all acting like she's some kind of hero. She's still poor. She still lives in a trailer. She still doesn't belong here with the rest of us." "You're absolutely right," Otum said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood in the center of the chaos, calm as the eye of a hurricane. But there was something different about her now, something that hadn't been there before. A kind of quiet power that seemed to radiate from her like heat from a fire. "I am poor," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I do live in a trailer. My clothes do come from thrift stores. And you know what? I'm proud of every single one of those things." Colonel Martinez smiled, and it was the kind of smile that could have powered the entire school. "Tell them why." "Kiddo." Autumn looked around the cafeteria, meeting every eye that dared to look at her. The shy, quiet girl who had sat in the back for 3 years was gone. In her place stood someone who looked like she could take on the world and win. "I'm poor because my father chose to serve his country instead of chasing money. Every dollar he could have earned in the private sector, he gave up to protect people like you." She looked directly at Carson, people who don't even know his name but sleep safely because of what he does. Her voice grew stronger, more confident, filling the cafeteria like music. I live in a trailer because every extra dollar my mom earns goes to supporting military families whose loved ones are deployed overseas. She runs a support network for wives and children of deployed soldiers. She feeds people. She counsels people. She holds families together when the world tries to tear them apart. Students were leaning forward now, hanging on every word. My clothes come from thrift stores because I'd rather spend my money on books and debate tournament entry fees than designer labels. Because I learned something growing up that apparently some people never figure out. Your worth isn't measured by your price tag. The reporter from Education Weekly was frantically scribbling notes, his pen moving so fast it was almost a blur. You want to know what I learned growing up in that trailer park? Autumn continued. I learned that real strength doesn't come from having money. It comes from having principles. Real courage doesn't come from bullying people weaker than you. It comes from standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. Real power doesn't come from your father's wallet. It comes from your own mind, your own work, your own determination to be better than the circumstances you were born into. The cafeteria was dead silent. 300 students hung on every word like their lives depended on it. For 3 years, Autumn continued, I sat in the back of this cafeteria and listened to you talk about who belongs and who doesn't, who matters and who doesn't, who's worthy of respect and who isn't. And I kept quiet because I was studying you, learning from you, watching how you treat people you think are beneath you. She looked directly at Carson, and her gaze was like a laser. And do you know what I learned? Carson couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The confident bully who had ruled the school was gone, replaced by a scared boy who was finally facing consequences for his actions. I learned that everything you think makes you powerful. Your money, your status, your ability to make others feel small is actually proof of how weak you really are. Really powerful people don't need to tear others down to feel strong. They lift others up. The producer from CNN was frantically taking notes, her eyes wide with excitement. This was exactly the kind of story that changed lives. You want to know why I'm really here? Autumn asked. Not just at this school, but standing here in front of all of you right now? She reached into her backpack and began pulling out items that made the entire cafeteria gasp. Not just one trophy, but 5. Not just certificates, but official government documents with golden seals. Not just awards, but medals on ribbons that caught the light like captured starlight. National High School Debate Champion, she said, holding up the first trophy. 2 years in a row, she held up the second trophy. National Youth Leadership Award from the Department of Education. The third trophy was larger than the others. Outstanding Young American Award from the Veterans of Foreign Wars. She held up a folder thick with papers. Academic scholarship to Harvard University. Full ride. With housing and meal plan included, the folder was followed by another. Congressional Medal of Merit for Community Service. A small medal on a ribbon gleamed like gold. Presidential Volunteer Service Award for organizing literacy programs in low-income communities. The cafeteria erupted again. But this time it wasn't whispers or gasps. It was cheering, thunderous, overwhelming applause that shook the windows and made the floor vibrate. But Autumn wasn't done. You want to know the real secret? She said, her voice somehow carrying over the noise. None of this was about beating you, Carson. None of this was about proving you wrong or making you look stupid. This was about proving something to myself. The applause died down as everyone leaned in to hear what she would say next. I wanted to prove that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going, that what your parents do for a living doesn't limit what you can do with your life, that being poor doesn't make you powerless, and being rich doesn't automatically make you important. She looked around the cafeteria one more time, her gaze taking in every face, every expression, every person who had ever made her feel invisible. And today, standing here in front of all of you, I think I finally proved it. Colonel Martinez stepped forward, his chest swelling with pride, so obvious, it was almost visible. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Autumn Davis, who, in addition to everything she just mentioned, has also been selected as this year's recipient of the Presidential Scholarship for Academic Excellence. She'll be attending Harvard University in the fall with a full academic scholarship where she's been invited to join the varsity debate team as a freshman in honor that's only been given to 12 students in the university's 300-year history. The noise that followed was unlike anything Westfield Academy's cafeteria had ever heard. Students were on their feet, cheering, applauding, some of them crying. Teachers were hugging each other. Even the lunch staff had come out of the kitchen to see what was happening. Miss Harrison was openly weeping. Autumn, honey, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you let us celebrate with you? Because, Autumn said gently, I needed to know that I could do it on my own. I needed to know that my worth wasn't dependent on other people's recognition. In the middle of it all, Carson Mitchell stood alone. His friends had abandoned him. His girlfriend wouldn't look at him. His father was facing federal charges. And the girl he'd tried to destroy had just revealed herself to be everything he'd ever pretended to be. Actually special. Actually important. Actually worthy of respect. Detective Morrison approached Carson with his notebook still open. Son, we need to have a serious conversation about how you obtained information about a military family. And about the video you posted online last week. Carson's face went white. What video? The edited video of Miss Davis that you posted to social media with false information about her background, the one that's been viewed 87,000 times and generated multiple threats against her family, the one that's caused a deployed soldier to receive harassment while serving his country overseas. Blake stepped away from Carson like he was radioactive. Dude, you posted that video. You told me you were just going to show it to a few people. Carson's voice cracked like breaking glass. I didn't know it would go viral. I didn't know people would threaten her family. But you knew it was fake, Detective Morrison said, his voice cold as winter. You knew the information you included was false? And you posted it anyway. With malicious intent to harm a minor and her family, the reporter from Education Weekly stepped forward. Excuse me, Detective, but are you saying there's been an organized cyberbullying campaign against Miss Davis? A coordinated effort to damage her reputation? I'm saying we're investigating several serious charges related to harassment, defamation, cyberbullying, and the deliberate spread of false information about a military family. We're also looking into potential violations of federal laws protecting service members and their families from retaliation and harassment. Sierra suddenly spoke up, her voice high and panicked. Carson, you never told me any of this. You said you just wanted to put her in her place. You never said anything about fake videos or military families or federal crimes. Blake nodded frantically. Yeah, dude. You made it sound like you just wanted to embarrass her a little. You never said her dad was actually a war hero. Carson looked around desperately. This isn't fair. She's not supposed to be important. She's supposed to be nobody. She sits alone at lunch. She never talks to anyone. She wears clothes from Goodwill. How was I supposed to know she was some kind of genius? But I'm not nobody. Autumn said quietly. And somehow her voice carried over all the chaos and confusion. I never was. You just chose not to see me. Colonel Martinez put his hand on Autumn's shoulder. And now? Autumn smiled. For the first time in 3 years, she smiled in the Westfield Academy cafeteria. And it was beautiful. It was the kind of smile that could light up a room, or change a life, or make someone believe in possibilities they'd never considered before. Now they see me perfectly. The CNN producer stepped forward, her eyes bright with excitement. Miss Davis, we'd love to interview you about your journey. Your story is exactly the kind of inspiration young people across America need to hear. Would you be willing to appear on our show? And we'd like to feature you on the cover of our next issue, added the reporter from Education Weekly. Success stories like yours are exactly why we do what we do. You represent everything that's right about American education. Principal Edwards, who had been standing in shocked silence through the entire scene, finally found his voice. Miss Davis, I owe you an apology. This school owes you an apology. We should have recognized your achievements earlier. We should have celebrated your success. We should have protected you from this harassment. Autumn nodded graciously. "Thank you, Principal Edwards. But honestly, I'm glad things happened the way they did." "Why?" He looked genuinely confused. "Because it taught me something important. It taught me that other people's opinion of you only matters if you let it. It taught me that real victory isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about becoming so successful that their attacks become irrelevant." She looked at Carson one last time. He stood there, small and defeated, facing criminal charges and social exile. The consequences of his own cruelty finally catching up with him like a storm he'd been running from his whole life. "I hope you learned something from this, Carson," she said, and there was no cruelty in her voice, no satisfaction, just genuine hope that somehow, some way, he might become a better person. "I hope you learn that trying to tear others down doesn't build you up. I hope you learn that real strength comes from lifting people up, not pushing them down. And I hope you learn that before it's too late to change who you are." Carson opened his mouth to respond, but Detective Morrison's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Come on, son. We need to continue this conversation at the station. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it." As they led Carson toward the exit, he turned back one last time. "This isn't over. Autumn, you can't change who you are. You'll always be trailer trash, no matter how many trophies you have." The cafeteria went silent, waiting to see how Autumn would respond to this final attack. She looked at Carson with something that might have been pity. "You know what, Carson? You're absolutely right. I can't change who I am. I'm the daughter of a man who serves his country. I'm the daughter of a woman who dedicates her life to helping others. I'm someone who works hard for everything I achieve. I'm someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If that's what trailer trash looks like, then I'm proud to be trailer trash. But what about you? What are you proud of?" Carson had no answer. Detective Morrison led him away as the cafeteria erupted in applause once more. They were talking about Autumn Davis, about her achievements, about her strength, about the lesson she'd just taught them, all about the difference between having power and being powerful. A girl named Madison from the popular table approached Autumn hesitantly. Autumn, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For 3 years, I walked past you every day and never said hi. I just assumed, it's okay." Autumn said gently, "I understand." "No, it's not okay," Madison continued. "I should have been better. We all should have been better." More students began approaching. Some apologized. Some asked questions about her achievements. Some just wanted to say thank you for showing them what real courage looked like. And somewhere in Eastern Europe, Staff Sergeant David Davis would read about his daughter's triumph on a secure military communication device and smile with pride that could be seen from space, because Autumn Davis had just proved something that Carson Mitchell would spend the rest of his life learning. When you mess with someone who's already survived everything the world could throw at them, you don't make them weaker, you make them legendary.